Alienation. I went into the cafe from the hard, icy rain, which bit my neck and down my spine. The barista smiled at me, which was common because she was good at her job. I smiled back and signed to her with my stiff, thawing hands. "A house brew, please." She poured me a mug of delicious drip coffee. It was a dark roast with a flavor hinting of cocoa and pine. I stirred some half and half with sugar packets. I noticed the usual regulars were in today. Nobody else. I reached the high stool where I always charged my cell phone and read for a while. I was almost done with a very sad book. It was an amazing book, well written and captivating, and its sadness had less to do with the tragedy and the plot, but how said tragedy reflected the author's soul, a soul I was scared to admit that I found all too familiar. My usual cafe spot was facing away from the counter at the coffee bar, facing the window to the busy street outside. The weather had turned cold again. I was stressed because of a joke I made in poor taste and how a good friend of mine had taken the joke. We had a few beers last night, and I had gotten a bit of a buzz. The joke was merely in relation to how the local libraries are and how they allow for daycare centers to collect there, and with it, the noise. They were very loud children, and my friend who grew up here did not take this criticism well. He rescinded his previous offer to help me with a project at the end of the month. It was one nearly impossible to do alone. So with a heavy heart, I sat down to drink coffee and finished a book that I was unfortunately to part ways with soon. And it was like the heavens had peered into my mind at this melancholy, for as I began reading, 5 people came into the usually quiet cafe. They were all talking loudly, laughing with annoying tones. "They'll settle down once they get their drinks," I thought to myself. I set my book aside and watched the busy street corner which was visible from the cafe window wall. "This is my window," I thought playfully. "This is my window and my mug because I am using it, and this is my spot." The 5 folks who had wandered in with boisterous manners decided to sit as close to me as possible. Great, just great. Surely, though, their volume will at least go down once they've gotten their order. They continued talking loudly as possible. It was even hurting my ears. I frowned as I sighed. I took a deep breath and grabbed a napkin. I took out my hearing aids and set it on the napkin. This didn't silence the people, as they only seemed to get louder and louder. I couldn't make out what they said, nor could I focus on my book with the muffled sounds of ecstatic speech coming from my left and coming from my right and coming from behind me. I kept reading despite the fact. One of them seemed to be watching me. His eyes never left me, and I tried staring back, but this did not work. He kept making loud noises with his chair and setting his coffee mug on his table as loud as possible, all while speaking loudly to his wife, and with his whole body and eyes aimed at me. It was most unsettling. Did my hearing aids garner unwanted attention? Were they all testing my patience? Or were they all just generally loud people in this part of the country? I had this problem in bars where one expected loudness. However, it seemed to persist everywhere I went. The libraries, the shelter I stayed at, no matter what time of night, and even the park. Everywhere it followed me. A loud, obnoxious voice, a child crying, a couple fighting. The man kept changing his mug and clanging it on the table so hard that I thought the darn thing would shatter. His eyes never left me. My paranoia imagined everyone around me watching, trying to poke my inner bear, trying to get a reaction they could then demonize. My eyes stayed glued to the book. I found myself rereading and rereading each page to spite them all, as they seemed to spite me. How dare he read, these folks seemed to wonder. How dare he want quiet? And despite me keeping quiet and smiling, showing no sign of being annoyed, they seemed to try and pull and tug at me with their best attempts to get me to growl and freak out in a fury. However, I maintained an outward calm, but inside I did growl. I did hiss, and with my mind's eye, my inner demon, my inner monster showed itself to me. We can get through this, okay? I reassured myself. It will all be over when they leave. After an hour, it was apparent that it was I who needed to leave, so I packed my self-help book and my phone charger away in my pack, and I turned around. The row of people stared at me, all with angry faces, their fear, their hate, their disdain all in their eyes. They seemed ready to throw the first stone, but no executioner was there to call it out. "Where are you from, boy?" a man called out. Strangely enough, none of the baristas were in sight. "I'm from Tennessee," I answered. "We need you to go back home," the lady on the other side of the room hollered out. As she did so, the first man grabbed his neck skin rather oddly. Everyone else followed suit. And that was really a strange choice of words on my part, because as I was beginning to leave the cafe, the angry mob all began to tear their skins off their neck and up their faces, revealing scaly reptilian heads underneath. I ran outside after a good scream. The sidewalks were not moving, just still. Everyone was staying still in their place, staring at me. One man had an enthusiasm about him with a sinister smile. "Get him," he said, revealing sharp fangs that came out of his misshapen mouth. I could see his molars and front teeth on the ground. I ran as fast as I could to a bus stop. Thankfully, I hopped aboard one that pulled up right then. The driver seemed human and concerned. Everyone on the bus seemed okay. I pulled my hearing aids out of my pocket and then put them back in my ears, for nobody was shouting anymore, and I needed to hear my fellow humans. "You won't believe what just happened," I told the bus driver. She looked back at me with a misshapen smile. Her look of concern was completely gone. "We're happy you could join us," a voice said behind me. As I looked down the row of seats on the bus, I saw fangs and yellow and red eyes glaring back, and misshapen mouths dripping with drool. It was a long trip to the airport.